Hello, my I Can Relate family, and welcome back to a new season of I Can Relate. This episode is about sex trafficking. And before I get into it, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of you who sent your messages during my season off when my mom was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer. I really appreciate all your messages. It means the world to me. The purpose of this podcast is the power of vulnerability. And I felt so happy that I could share it with you and that it was so well received with all the messages and all the support and love. So with sex trafficking episode, we're going to be sitting down today to talk to Sean, and I wanted to take a moment here to read out the definition. So sex trafficking is when victims are manipulated or forced to engage in various forms of sexual activity for someone else's financial gain. So my main takeaway from this interview with Sean was shock because I had thought trafficking included transportation of people. And actually, you can go home to your bed at night and still be sex trafficked. So, our guest Sean lives and works in Colorado. He was sexually trafficked from the age of 5 to 18, and he experienced many forms of abuse, which we talk about, one of which includes being included in child sexual pornography. So, this story is really powerful, and Sean wants to get the message out there that it's not just women, it's also men and young boys who go through this. So I hope you enjoy this episode and get something out of it. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
dialing in.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you all for reaching out. It's an important message. So,
It is. And I really appreciate your time and being so open. Where are you based?
we are in Loveland, Colorado, north of Denver, but my work goes all over the world. So,
That's awesome. So you travel around and talk as well?
I do. I've spoken internationally, and then I work with a number of organizations through the OSCE over in Vienna. I've managed to connect several times with over people in law enforcement and NGOs in over 150 countries. So it's uh
Wow.
it's yeah, it's I tell people, um I found my purpose. This is not what I planned, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing incredible work. So I really appreciate you coming on today, and so cool that you're in Colorado. I did a road trip through Denver. So who knows? I might have passed through your area. It was beautiful that trip. But yeah, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna just jump straight in here. And please do let me know if there's any definitions that I get wrong or anything you're uncomfortable with in the moment. Feel free to let me know.
Yeah, that's no worries. I tell people if it's a question to feel free to ask me anything. If it's a question I'm not comfortable with, um, I'll say that. I will say that, sharing my story does sometimes I have to pause because it is still emotional. Um, but I've certainly come a long way. And people tell me, don't worry about tearing up. Tears are transparent. So,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely. Well, tears are
it's
welcome here.
good. Thanks. Because, yeah, I used to, when I was a little kid, I'd get punished if I cried in front of anybody. So I learned to hide, and I don't hide anymore.
Wow. Would you take us back to the very beginning? You said, you were age 5 to 9 when you were sex trafficked. How did it all begin?
Well, the grooming started prior to that, and then they used older teenage boys to sort of bring me into the network, and then they introduced me to the people who would traffic me around. And one of the things that people always find surprising is when I point out that somewhere between 30 and 40% of the people who bought me were women. And one of the challenges I'm often told is women are never involved in this. Oh, yes, they are.
Oh my
um,
God. And just to be super clear, when you say they bought you, as in this was part of your trafficking that you experienced was sex trafficking. So women would exploit you.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I would be picked up. I mean, it was a small town in the Midwest in the US, and they knew where to find me on the weekends or over the summer or after school or whatever. And it was just a different day and time. People say, "How is it a 5-year-old can be out playing for 3 hours and no one knows where they're at?" Well, if you've ever seen the old Andy Griffith show, the little kid on there, Opie, would be out playing all morning and come in at noon, say hi to his dad in the sheriff's office, and then, well, just be home on time for dinner, and he'd be off for another 3, 4 hours. A lot of kids did that. Um, and people knew the routine. The guy who was, I think, head of the network was familiar with my family dynamic, so he knew my routine. And basically, yeah, they would just come find me, and you know, um, with the grooming process early on, I was taught not to say no. So it's like, get in the car, we're going somewhere. And so
Mm,
that would be um, how it would happen. One time I was taken out to a farmhouse out in the country, and that's when I was used in child sexual abuse material with another boy, um, a girl, two men, and a woman. um, and then they did that for however long it went on, and then I was taken home, and I never said anything because uh, early on when they were in that grooming stage, I fought back as much as a little kid can, and I got beaten for it. So,
oh my
you know,
goodness.
I tell people that's when I lost my voice. I learned not to fight back.
Yeah.
And, they threatened, one of the threats that I got was, we'll kill your dog if you say anything. No one's going to want you, which are not uncommon things for them to do. And,
Yeah.
um, the fear factor worked, but the thing that was always sort of a issue was sometimes when they were done doing what they wanted to do, I'd still get hit just to
Wow.
reinforce the message. And one time I had a rabbit killed in front of me, and they said, if you say anything, you're next. So,
Oh my
when
God.
that was well into it too. I had gotten to a place where I was very cooperative because I didn't know I had a choice.
Yeah.
So, but they just reinforce it constantly.
Wow.
And I'm sure the same is true with girls as well.
Yeah. When you say did you say there were 3 people that one time at that farmhouse, 3 adults? Or were
Yes.
there okay, so 3 adults. And were there multiple children there? I think I heard you say that as well?
Yeah, there was, along with me, there was another boy that I knew, and a girl that I knew from my elementary school. And the adults were present.
Oh my God.
And
Present and being the villains in this situation. Am I
and
correct?
participating, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So before we keep going, I wanted to just take a moment for your childhood self because that that is really must have been so scary and so almost like defining as like a child for like you said you lost your voice. Wow. So I just wanted to take a moment there, just sending love to your childhood self and a big hug. How hard that must have been.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You, well, like I said, you can see the emotions, because, yeah, when you're a little kid, when you're put into that world, I tell people, by the time I was 9, I could drink. I knew how to drink. I knew how to smoke. I knew all about pornography, and I thought all that was normal. And I didn't realize I had a choice. So, even ultimately, we moved away from that town. Um, but other people would still find me later on and use me. The last time I got used, actually, I was 19. Um, And I'd been told as a little kid, by the time you turn 18, 19, you should probably just die because once you're no longer a teenager, you won't have any value. Um, and that's when I finally said, enough, no more. And I thought, you know, um, either I was going to off myself or someone was going to kill me. Well, I made it past age 20 and it didn't happen, but that's when I went sort of inside and just hid it all and became a very angry and defensive young adult.
Wow. And those other children that also grew up into adults, did you, you said that it was a young boy and a girl. Do you know what happened to them? Did they get out?
Yeah, the boy ended up um, getting into prostitution as a young adult and con- uh, got AIDS and died. And I don't know what happened to the girl because we left that town, so I wasn't part of the school anymore. And um, so I've
Yeah.
thought about going through like classmates.com trying to reach out to her, but I don't even know where to begin with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's also not, your responsibility as well. It must feel like there's like pressure as well in that sense, but you've got to take care of yourself.
yeah, you really do. And I mean, I learned in my counseling process, you know, part of it was we play that we're taught the blame game. And so, I blamed me. And, I talked to my counselor. I said, well, you know, but when I was a teenager, I let them do it and I didn't know they had a choice. And she says, I have never met a teenage boy yet with a mind or girl fully able to comprehend that choice. And she said, by the time you were 14, you'd already been sexually active, 8, 9 years. You were programmed to believe that's what people got to do.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Have you had some time to unlearn, all of the horrible things like that were said to you of your worth, your worthiness, and, the punishments?
Yeah, I've done a lot of that in my counseling process, and I do run a faith-based organization called Starfish in Colorado. And what people find amazing today is that not only do I work with other survivors in training, but I go to several prison ministries and work with convicted sex offenders.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Well, how has that
and
been part of your healing journey?
well, because I felt like it was a God-led thing, and once I started, I realized that every single person I talked to had lived the same sort of experience. And, they just didn't, they were brought up that way and were unable to find an escape. Um, but I've had 3 different law enforcement agencies here in Colorado tell me that when somebody like you comes around, speaks uh, to these people, they've found that the reoffending rate in those groups drops by over 90%.
Whoa. So
Yeah,
when you say speak to those people, you are referring to sex offenders.
that's right. People who've come out of prison and are in the halfway program, or people who are still in prison. Um, and
Wow.
I don't put the blame game on them. In fact, I tell people that I had a guy one time, first time I spoke, for example, um, it was there were 25 men in the room, and I said, I'll hang around afterwards, and they all lined up to speak to me. And the last guy came up and said, you know, I just got out of prison for conviction of possession of child pornography. And he said, after listening to you, I just have to know, how can a man like you forgive a man like me? And I said, because God forgives me. So I told him, I said, as someone who was on the other side of that camera, I release you from that. Now you take it to God, you get his forgiveness, and you could see this weight fall off him. And gotten through the program. He's reintegrated. He's not had any issues since then. Um, Another guy that I've worked with who actually abused his own daughter has managed to reconnect with her. They have a good relationship now. Um, you know, and I tell people, I said, they may forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Um,
Yes, that is an important distinguishment. Yeah.
mhm.
So for you, do you feel that you have forgiven the people who participated in abusing you?
Yes. And the hardest thing, I think, the biggest challenge was forgiving myself, because there was still a part of me emotionally connected to, yeah, well, you let them do it. You never said anything, all that stuff, which, but I remember what my counselor had taught me. She said, a child can't consent. They can,
Yes.
they can only comply. And, you didn't have a choice. I had, I spoke to a group one time, and one of the uh, women who ran a service provider agency asked me, she said, with the child sexual abuse material, well, you were a boy. Why didn't you just run away? And I said, well, you might want to rethink that question. I said, because here I am in a farmhouse out in the country. I don't know how far away my home is. I have no clothes on. I'm in a back room with three adults present. Exactly where was I going to run?
Yeah. And
You
also
know?
you're a child who's being told what to do, and
Yep.
that's what childhood is. You're told what to do, and you learn the rules and you follow them. So it
Yeah.
completely had warped your world of what you should be doing because you didn't know it was wrong.
Well, and if I started to question it, the threats always came back. So,
Yes.
you know,
Yes. Do you mind if I just cast us back to being in that farm? For you, at the time, did you feel like, a bit of Stockholm syndrome? Because I've read about feeling empathy, or did you feel pure hatred towards these people?
um, I didn't really feel hatred that I recall, and or the connection to him. It's just like, I was lured out there on the promise that it was actually a woman that picked me up and took me out there, and she had seen me in an elementary school art program over the summer. And so she said, we've got more of this going on. I know you love to draw, you're good at it. And that's how she got me into the car and took me out there. And then in the back room, and everybody's inside, that's where all the art stuff is. And then when we got to the back room, um, I remember very clearly she opened the door and pushed me in and said, "This one will play." Um, and one of the two men there had seen me before, and he's like, "Oh, I know him." And um, then the door shut and was locked, and suddenly it was like, "Get out of your clothes and get on the bed with the other two children, and you just do it." Uh, I had learned if I fought at all, I'd get hit. So that was my biggest hope, was if I cooperate, I won't get beaten again.
Wow. My question in this sense is with the beatings, um, did they purposely not leave marks so as not to, alert your parents or your guardians?
Yeah, it was always on. There were times I got slapped in the face and knocked over, but those marks disappear. But it was usually on the behind. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And for you, was there, so just, I don't know this because I haven't asked this, but what was your living situation at home? Did you have parents, guardians?
yeah, my parents were still married, but by that point in time, their marriage, by the time I was born, was having issues. And my father felt bad when he finally learned about all this. He said, "Your mother and I were distracted, and we shouldn't have been, and that's our fault." Now, I was born um, 11 months after my brother, and my maternal grandmother always said, "Yeah, you weren't supposed to be born. You almost killed your mother because it was a hard pregnancy." Um, And, so that was the kind of message I received there. And, you know, there was verbal and emotional sort of abuse going on at home again, just because my aunt told me one time, she said, yeah, we should have known something because you went from overnight from a sweet little kid to an angry little kid. And we
Mm,
just thought it was all the dysfunction going on in the house. Well, that was the day that the grooming process sort of reached a new level. Um, and so that was the first time I got beaten. And, little kids don't, they just kind of, I don't know how to describe it except, there was a reason for that anger, but no one ever asked why. They just assumed. Um,
wow.
and after that point in time, I certainly wasn't going to tell, even if they did.
Yes. It's
So,
interesting that you said that because one of the signs I interviewed, my first ever podcast interview was with on child sexual abuse. And one of the signs to look out for of if a kid is being sexually abused is if they have a personality change, just like you're
yes,
talking about overnight.
right.
Um, but it's so interesting what you're saying about because there was so much going on with your parents and that they assumed it was potentially they're arguing or as you were saying. So that's very it just makes it obvious like there's you can know the signs and still not pick up on it.
Yeah, and I do tell people that that because I've had people ask me, what's the best way to keep my children safe? And I say, make sure they always know that whatever it is, they can come and tell you.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Sean, for sharing that. That is so important. And it sounds like I can see you're tearing up. It sounds like you wish your parents had said that to you.
I do. And, my mom has passed away. My dad, my family is very supportive. In fact, he told me he listened to another podcast I did last year, and he said, just so you know, neither
It's okay. Take as much time as you need.
he said, neither your mother or I ever thought you were a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
And I I tell him, you know, he says, well, we just should have known, and I feel horrible. And I said, well, it was they operate so cleverly at twisting the mind of a child not to say anything.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
said the truth is neither one of us can change it anyway. But I said, I forgive you for that. I have a great relationship with my father now. Um, you know, it's
Yeah.
I suspect that my mom had suspicions that things were going on, but she was never able to ask, and it just was a different time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't hold them responsible.
Yeah. When did you eventually tell them what happened? Or it sounds like you didn't ever tell your mother.
I did not. I was in the process I felt like I had written a book already, and or I was in the counseling process, and I'd spoken publicly by that point, and I felt like God was saying, "It's 5,000 people have heard your story now, and your family doesn't know a thing. What's wrong with this picture?" It's like I can't tell them to them. It's personal, and it's like God said, it's to me, it's personal too. You need to tell your family. So I
Mhm.
started with my sister, and then I told my brother and the other sister, and then I was about to tell my mom, but she had uh, encountered some kind of illness and was getting very weak and in the hospital. And my one sister said, I know you want to, but can you wait?" And I said, "Yeah, I can." And she ended up passing away, but I don't know that she needed that at the end of her life. Um, but I was eventually able to tell my father after the book came out. I said, "Well, you need to know. I've written a book. It's on Amazon, and this is what it's about." So and my family that's still alive and my network is entirely supportive, which is a good thing because a
Yeah.
lot of people, kids or adults, don't get familial support.
And they don't maybe don't believe you either, and
Right.
that's probably a big fear. Was
Yeah.
there ever that fear for you that you wouldn't be believed?
Oh yeah, many times. That was, part of it because that's the other thing the predators said early on was no one's going to believe you anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and again, when you hear that at 5, 6, 7, you believe it because it just
Mhm.
sinks in. And so eventually I was able to tell, and so that was, to answer your earlier question, another
Yeah.
lie that was broken off.
Yeah. And, I've read that people, especially children who were sex trafficked, the victims get isolated from their families and their friends. Did
Mhm.
that happen to you, and how did they isolate you?
Well, I didn't have a huge network of friends growing up, and the family dynamic at home was what it was, and so they used the reinforcement techniques of just threatening when they were using you, um, to keep it all you turn it all inward and keep it hidden. So
Yeah.
you kind of self isolate. Um,
Yeah.
it's yeah. Uh, in fact, when I told my brother, his first words were, "Well, that explains a lot." And,
Wow.
I suspect he wondered what happened because, see, I was between my 16th and 17th year in high school. My mom was getting remarried, moving away, and I didn't want to move with her and start a new school, coming into my senior year. And so I just moved into an apartment with my brother, who was in college at that point. And um, but it almost felt like I was an emancipated minor at that point because, it just seemed like that's no one wanted me. Um, and so when the military came around to our high school, so I ended up joining the Navy because I thought I'm going to be 18 out of high school and then what?
Yeah.
You know, so they offered me that career, and that's in fact the last time I was abused was on my first duty station,
Oh my
coming out of
god.
yeah, and it happens actually a lot in the military, or it did. I think it's a lot less so now. People are more aware of it, but and so the VA is working with me here, the Veterans Administration, to process a disability claim. But the VA lady asked me, she said, I'm just curious, and I don't mean to sound challenging, but why didn't you report? It's like, well, the way it was done at the time, the guy who would have taken the report kit was the guy who had orchestrated it.
Oh my god.
So it would have had to gone to him, and then now they've changed that. You can go outside your command structure to report. But I said, ultimately, um, I said I was used to it.
Yeah, but also, what a strange question to ask because I feel like everyone who's got like a sense knows that there's so much fear in reporting and not being believed and not wanting
Mhm.
to cause any trouble. I just think if you're finally talking about it, that's the wrong question to ask.
Yeah, and she was able to connect me with a VA counselor who did the initial psychologist interview, so we're processing that claim.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's going to go through. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, I just it's like I didn't know I had a choice.
Yeah. Do you
And
think there was something, you had because there's no way these people knew each other before. Is there because I heard you say something before about, oh, I recognize this young boy when you came into the farm. Is there a community or a network of these abusers who know each other?
there are, and there's also ways that they can tell. I mean, earlier in my teens, there were trigger phrases, and people will hang out and say something, and 99 kids will be like, "Okay, that's weird," and I'm getting away, and they leave. But the one that they can spot, it will respond differently, and so for me, for a lot of boys, the trigger phrase is good boy, or are you a good boy? And, a normal kid will be like, don't know who you are, and I'm leaving. For someone like me, it would be I'd freeze up, and then they knew they had you. And I've worked with law enforcement people who've worked with, from a forensic analysis standpoint, with convicted offenders. And consistently, offenders will say, "Oh, yeah, I could walk into a student union at a college or,
Yeah.
someplace where high schoolers are hanging out, and in 5 minutes spot 3 or 4 kids that are vulnerable." So
Wow.
how, I don't quite know, but I mean, they look for boys or girls who have a self, who may be by themselves, or not part of the group or whatever.
Yeah.
And and that's really what it came down to, because I didn't feel loved at home. So when these
Yeah.
people initially got me, they would say, "Well, we'll love you." Um, and I learned to believe that that was what love was.
Yeah.
And by the time I was a teenager, I thought, well, it's fake love, but fake is better than nothing.
Hmm.
And then you get to the adult stage, and it's like, well, fake isn't fun either.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. My thought process there went to, you can identify people, like you said, who children who you think would be vulnerable. And I'm casting my mind back to when you said most of the abusers were abused themselves. So
yeah,
maybe that's how that works.
it is. You're able to see that vulnerability. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably true. I've never worked with women who were convicted sex offenders, only men, because of the way the jail system's set up. Um, they usually have women talk to women, men talk to men. So,
Okay.
but I've been ordained now, so that's going to open doors for me at the state and federal penitentiary levels. And
Yeah.
because I go into local, well, I work in the LA County Jail, which is like a small prison.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I need training for that, because people have said, going into the Supermax prison here in Colorado, you're going to encounter people who are thoroughly unrepentant. And
Wow.
they'll probably say things to you like, "Well, let me tell you what I would have done."
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. That
But
must be hard for you to deal with that.
it is. But my answer to that is, you know what? I lived through it when it was happening for real, and I can survive the. I can live through and deal with the memories now. So
Yeah.
anything you can say just bounces off me.
Yeah. I do have a question for you actually.
Yeah,
I going into this for some reason in my mind, and I wonder if other people thought the same. When I think of human trafficking and sex trafficking, I don't think of people going home at night to their parents, and
yeah.
I think that's maybe a lack of education, maybe the movie Taken. Um,
Hmm.
it's very this is very eye-opening to know that it literally is people who spend the night in their own bed can still be sex trafficked. That's really
Yeah,
eye-opening.
yeah. It's very true. I mean, taking the scenario in that movie does happen. One of the things that is a concern for the the problem that we're having on our border with open borders is kids are being brought north, but also kids are being taken south. And typically they are the ones being taken somewhere are homeless children. And there is that population. But for a lot of, especially young, teenagers or preteens, yeah, it often happens where they're abused and then taken home and threatened and dropped off. And so you go back to your own bed at night and you're relatively safe. There is a percentage of trafficking victims who are trafficked by their own family. Um,
Wow.
so you have familial abuse where um, that's happening. I worked with a guy in the UK somewhere through another organization that I connected with. He was a young guy, and his name is Alex. That's all I know. I never got his last name because he never asked anything of me other than time, and we talked a lot. Um, but so if you're listening, Alex, I still pray for you.
Oh, yeah.
But His situation was his mom was American, his dad was British, stepfather was British, and if I understood correctly, the stepfather ended up the mom died mysteriously, and then he and his brother were trafficked from he was 5 and I think his brother was 7, all the way until the point in time where the dad actually died. He was in the police somewhere in some village, um, and they came in to get the boys, and you know, found all of the videos and everything else. And
Wow.
you know, so this man actively trafficked those boys, and people have told me I feel embarrassed talking to you because what happened to me was so much less than what happened to you. And I said, yeah, but it's not a competition. Because
Yes.
for
Yes.
for Alex and his brother, um, it was weekly, whereas with me it may be months between times. But the thing that you live with when you're a little kid is like, when are they coming back?
Yeah.
You
That
know?
fear. Do you
Yeah.
still live with that fear?
No. I for a while, once I started talking and once I wrote my book, I actually put my name on the title. And I thought there all those people had to have known who I was, but I don't know who they were.
Yeah.
Um, the vast majority were strangers. But I thought, well, maybe if they see my name on the book, um, they'll read it and they'll know that they're forgiven and get help.
Wow. You must be in such a strong place for that. That's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Not a lot of guys are speaking for boys. And, a lot of the opposition I still get are from people who say, well, women and girls, the common phrase last year was, are a disproportionate share of the trafficking victims. And my question to them is, you tell me what my proportionate share was,
Yeah. And
you
also, like
know?
you said, it's not a competition. Like we're
Yeah,
all human. It doesn't matter the gender.
exactly. And, and I do say that too, even though I run a faith based organization, I say, look, I don't care who someone is or how they identify. No one ever deserves any kind of abuse at any time.
Yes, absolutely. What advice would you give if someone is out there listening who is a victim of sex trafficking, and also to your younger self in the farmhouse? What advice would you give?
First thing you need to realize, it was not your fault. You you didn't deserve it. And reach out, talk to somebody, um, get that healing, because there are good counselors available out there who can walk you through every stage of it and get you to a place where you can in fact get healing. Um, so that would be my advice to survivors. And there's a lot of organizations, you know, who are willing to help you. So
Thank you for that. And the final question is, what advice do you have for people to support those, to support you, to support other victims who have gone through this?
believe people, because I've had people tell
Mm.
me it doesn't happen to boys. Now the good news is, um, I am working on 2 projects to build safe houses for boys. One's moving forward here in Colorado. It'll be the first in the state, and then one will be in Arizona. It'll be the first in Arizona, but outside of there, I'm only aware of 3 such places in the whole country. And Colorado has 3 safe houses for girls already, just in our one state. Um, and one organization, the guy complained to me and said, well, we're going to fight you on this because we need more beds for girls. And I said, we have 3 organizations here in Colorado with empty beds and nothing for boys. How can you be so indifferent?
I've actually never heard. So there's safe houses that people can go to when
Right.
they are being targeted.
Well, either targeted or rescued by law enforcement. But typically, what happens when a network is busted and street kids are rescued, and the boys are put into juvenile justice system and treated like criminals. Um,
What?
oh yeah, but that's really, I mean, I don't think countries started to focus on this, and a lot of organizations were born since 2000, and so even though it's been happening for centuries.
Well, it sounds like you're doing incredible work. Thank you so
Um,
much for your time, and for sharing your journey with us. It was very, I feel like I learned so much just in this last like 30 minutes. So thank you so much.
you're very welcome, and thank you